I was 12 the summer the Gharren survey team landed in our east field. We'd been on Prave 4 for 3 years by then. My father, me, and Drum. Drum was our Mastiff. English Mastiff. Brindle coat gone half gray at the muzzle. 206 pounds on the freight scale at the Reach settlement. He was 11. He'd been on the colony ship with us, listed in the manifest as livestock subcategory companion. My father hadn't argued the classification, said it wasn't worth the form. Drum spent most of his days on the porch. He had a spot where the planks sagged just enough to cradle his shoulders, and once he settled into it, he didn't move unless he wanted to. Which was rarely. He'd watch the east field for a while, watch the wind crossing the keth grass, and then he'd put his chin on his paws and close his eyes. Some mornings, I wasn't sure he'd open them at all. The Gharren came in on a wedge-hulled survey lander, 4 of them, standard sector grid mapping for the territorial compact. They set down about 40 meters past the fence line, which was as close as their landing protocol allowed to an occupied structure. I know this because the survey leader told me so later, as if the distance mattered. I was shelling Tuvo on the porch steps when the ramp came down. 4 Gharren in field gray technical suits, hard-shelled gear cases. Sensor rigs on their backs that made a low tonal hum I could feel behind my teeth. Tall species. The Gharren. Narrow-built, slate-colored skin, with fine bony ridges along their jawlines that shifted color with mood. The lead officer had rank marks on his collar. 3 concentric rings. He surveyed the homestead, the field, the fence, me, and then his gaze landed on Drum. Drum did not look at him. The team moved into the east field and began their setup. Sensor poles driven into the hard pan, ground anchors, a portable processing rack that hummed at a pitch I could feel in my molars. Standard work. My father had told me the compact surveys were nothing to worry about, just cataloging, he'd said. Grid by grid, sector by sector. They'll map, file, and leave. I kept shelling Tuvo. Drum kept sleeping. The first sign that something was wrong came about 20 minutes in. One of the Gharren technicians, the youngest I think, judging by how his ridgelines hadn't fully hardened, recalibrated his sensor rig for the 3rd time. I could hear the tonal reset from the porch, that descending chime their instruments make when the baseline's clear. He ran the scan again. The chime didn't settle. It climbed, stuttered, and went flat. He looked at the lead officer. The officer said something I couldn't hear and walked over to the processing rack. I didn't know what they were reading. I learned later that the spatial metrics, the basic dimensional constants their grid system relies on, weren't holding. The instruments would lock a reading, confirm it, and then a second pass would return a value 6% off, then 11, then back to the original, then somewhere new entirely. The rack couldn't reconcile the inputs. 3 of their 4 sensor poles were returning data that contradicted the 4th, and which 3 and which 1 kept rotating. The Gharren don't shout, I want to be clear about that. They're a disciplined species, but their voices changed. The lead officer's tone went from directive to clipped. The younger technician's hands moved faster on his console, and his ridgelines had gone from neutral gray to a dark, mottled charcoal. The 3rd member of the team, older, deliberate, carrying a secondary kit I hadn't seen him open, set a new ground anchor, ran a 5th scan, and then stood very still, looking at his readout. He said one word. I don't know what it meant, but the other 3 stopped working. They reconfigured. 2 more calibrations. They moved the sensor poles to fresh positions. They ran ground-penetrating sweeps and cross-checks I couldn't follow. The processing rack hummed higher, and then made a sound I hadn't heard before. A flat, grinding tone. Almost like a complaint. The lead officer powered it down, waited 30 seconds, and brought it back up. Same result. Different every pass. Consistent in nothing, except the refusal to be consistent. The youngest technician said something sharp. the older one answered. The officer cut them both off. They were arguing, not the way humans argue, not with volume and hands, but the ridgelines along all three jawlines had gone dark, and I'd been around enough Gharren traders at the Reach Market to know that meant stress, the first edge of something that, in Gharren terms, qualified as a loss of composure. I looked at Drum. He was asleep. His left ear twitched once, a fly maybe, or the wind shifting, and then he settled deeper into his spot on the planks. 206 pounds of brindle mastiff, chin flat on the wood, breathing slow enough that I could count the seconds between each exhale. 5, 6, 5 again. His coat moved with each breath. Nothing else moved at all. The lead officer walked toward the porch. He stopped at the fence line, regulation distance. He looked at me, then at Drum, and reached for the scanner on his belt. The small handheld unit, not the field rig. He pointed it at Drum. I didn't say anything. Drum didn't move. The officer read the display. I was close enough to see his jaw ridges change. They'd been dark with stress, the same mottled charcoal as his team's. Now they went pale, almost white. I had never seen that color on a Gharren before. Not at the market, not at the port office, not once. Pale, like something had quietly left the room. He lowered the scanner slowly. The animal, he said. His common was precise, the way Gharren speak it. No contractions, every consonant placed. This is your animal. That's Drum, I said. He's my dog. Your dog. He said it flat, not a question. Yes, sir. He looked at Drum again. Drum's eyes were still closed. His broad side rose, held, and fell. 5 seconds. 6. The porch plank under his ribs creaked softly with each breath. How long has he been in this state? I didn't understand the question at first. He's sleeping, I said. He does that. He sleeps a lot. The officer looked back at his team. The three of them stood around the processing rack, which was still cycling through contradictory readings. Their ridgelines were dark. Their postures were tight. One of them had his hand braced on the side of the rack, as if steadying it, or himself. The officer looked at Drum. Your animal, he said, has a resting biometric profile consistent with a Class 9 apex predator. He paused. It is listed in our reference index, under the category Deathworld Companion, Earth Native, Threat Dormant, Uncontained. There are notes attached to that listing. Another pause. Many notes. I waited. Drum breathed. The notes recommend, he said carefully, that if the animal is calm, the surveyor should consider why. Drum's ear twitched. The officer stood at the fence line for a long time after that. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at Drum, at the slow breathing, the slack jaw, the loose paws, the absolute and uninterrupted stillness of an animal that had heard their lander set down, heard their instruments stutter and fail, heard their voices tighten and their composure crack, and had not once opened his eyes. He turned and walked back to his team. I don't know what he said to them. I saw the youngest technician glance toward the porch, hold for a second, and look away. The older one began packing the secondary kit without being told. The lead officer powered down the processing rack, collapsed the sensor poles, and stowed the ground anchors. No further scans, no second attempt, no amended grid protocol or revised calibration approach. They packed the lander in 11 minutes, I counted. The lead officer walked back to the fence one more time before they sealed the ramp. We will file the sector as surveyed, he said. The spatial readings will be noted as inconclusive. What about the anomaly? I asked. I'd heard them use the word. He looked at Drum. There is no anomaly, he said quietly. There is an Earth-native apex companion sleeping on your porch. Our instruments were not malfunctioning. They were reading the field accurately. And the field includes him. He folded his hands behind his back. The protocols do not account for this. That is not a malfunction. It is a limitation. He paused. We will note the limitation. The lander lifted 6 minutes later. Dust rolled across the east field and settled slow over the Keth grass. The engine noise faded into the upper atmosphere, and then it was quiet again. The kind of quiet that Prey 4 does best. The wide kind, where you can hear the wind moving through the grass and nothing else. Drum opened one eye. He looked at the empty field where the lander had been. Then he looked at me. His tail shifted once against the planks, not a wag exactly, more of a slow, considered movement, the kind he made when he was deciding whether something was worth the effort of standing up. He closed his eye. I finished shelling the tuvo, brought the bowl inside, and started heating oil for dinner. Drum came in when he smelled it. He lay down beside the stove, the way he always did, and set his chin on my foot. My father got back from the Reach settlement the next evening. I told him the Gharren had come and gone. He asked if they'd caused any trouble. I said no. He looked at Drum, asleep in his spot on the porch, and nodded. They never do, he said. Not here. He didn't ask why.